Number 10. Bradley Finnan and Larry Brodax. On April the 4th of 2020, Larry Brodax was killed while carrying out a robbery in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Although his accomplice, Bradley Finnan, didn't actually fire the gun that ultimately killed the 58-year-old burglar, he was arrested and charged with murder 3 days later. It was reported that Brodax had confided in 38-year-old Finnan about the presence of $200,000 in boxes at the Arlington Heights residence 20 years earlier and believed that the money could still be there. Taking advantage of the safety measures put in place in response to the COVID pandemic, both men covered their faces with surgical masks before conducting the break-in. The homeowner, who had a doorbell camera installed for security purposes, opened the door believing the two men to be landscapers. The robbers could then be seen pushing their way into the house, and only 27 seconds later, Finnan was pushed out the door. Brodax had been fatally shot inside the living room by the resident, who was determined to have acted in self-defense and thus wasn't charged. Because Brodax's death occurred during an attempted robbery, Finnan was held criminally responsible. Upon his arrest, the man was charged with felony murder and home invasion. Number 9. Madison Harris. On February the 24th of 2020, Madison Harris was murdered at her grandparents' house in southern Mississippi. James Waldeck, who was engaged to Harris's grandmother at the time, was alerted to the fact that something had happened by his doorbell security app, which indicated that an ambulance had been called to his home. The resulting recording showed 5 teenagers entering the property through the garage, which was followed by the sound of gunshots. The teens subsequently ran back outside as they were chased out by Harris's father. The images captured by the camera allowed investigators to quickly identify the perpetrators, some of whom had visited the house frequently in the days and weeks preceding the deadly incident and had even been considered friends of the victim. 2 weeks prior to Harris's murder, the home had been burglarized, and Waldeck told authorities that he suspected both crimes to have been committed by the same individuals. Due to the age of the 5 suspects, their names weren't immediately disclosed to the public. However, it was reported that they'd each been charged with capital murder. Number 8. Las Vegas Man.
I just have a couple questions for you. Are you sure? Are you positive? I just have a couple questions for you. Are you sure? Are you positive? Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain?
An unnamed Las Vegas man was arrested on July the 21st of 2021 after allegedly threatening to assault a woman outside her residence. The man's accuser, whose name wasn't revealed to the media, shared a video of the incident that had been captured by a doorbell camera. In the recording, the suspect could be seen knocking on her door repeatedly, explaining that he had several questions for the homeowner. The woman's husband, who wasn't home at the time, used the doorbell camera's intercom system to ask the stranger his name. Rather than identify himself, the stranger replied with a chilling confession, claiming that he wanted the woman in the house to come outside so that he could assault and murder her. He added that he was armed with both a gun and a knife, and continued to insist that the woman step outside. By the time police arrived at the scene, the stranger had already left. Thanks to the recording uploaded by the victim, a neighbor recognized the man and contacted the authorities, who subsequently made an arrest in connection to the incident. The unnamed man was reportedly charged with coercion, obstructing a public officer, and aggravated stalking. Number 7. Jennifer Chioma Ibichi. 25-year-old Michael Egwagu, a former varsity college football player, was caught on camera confessing to the murder of his sister, Jennifer Chioma Ibichi, aged 32. The video, recorded on December the 27th of 2019, showed Egwagu exiting Ibichi's home with a kitchen knife in hand, his clothes covered in blood. Before leaving the property, the man took off his clothes and was then heard saying, "I killed Jennifer. The latter had been pregnant at the time of her death, and the medical examiner who conducted her autopsy reported the presence of between 1 to 2 dozen stab wounds on her body on July the 17th of 2020. Following a bench trial, Ibici was found not guilty by reason of insanity by presiding judge Julie Kokorik. He was subsequently transferred to a state hospital in order to undergo psychiatric treatment. Number 6. Gabriel West Jr. On November the 21st of 2019, Jonathan Qualls and Gabriel West Jr., both in their mid to late 20s, fatally shot Aaron Jones at his home in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jones, who'd allegedly sold illegal substances and sports gear out of his basement prior to his death, had installed a Ring security camera on both the front and side doors of his residence. Detectives were thus able to access recordings and pictures of the moments leading up to and immediately following the murder. Police discovered Jones's body in the basement, where he'd reportedly been shot to death, and also determined that money had been stolen. The images recorded by the doorbell camera, which showed the suspects entering the house and leaving with duffel bags in hand minutes later, were instrumental in the identification and arrest of Qualls and West. The former, who'd known the victim since childhood, agreed to testify against West as part of a plea bargain with prosecutors that sentenced him to 19 years for robbery. West, identified by his accomplice as the shooter, was handed down a minimum prison term of 55 years. Number 5. Michael Hettle. Former NASA executive Michael Hettle was filmed shooting his neighbor, National Guard member Javon Prather, 7 times during a fatal altercation at his home in Washington, D.C. on March the 3rd of 2020. In the footage recorded by the doorbell camera, 52-year-old Hettle was shown opening the front door and opening fire after the victim called on him to come out. The police arrived at the scene after having been alerted to the situation by concerned neighbors. According to eyewitnesses, the two men had been arguing over several property-related issues since 2016. Hettle later claimed to have been acting in self-defense, believing Prather was knocking on his door with the intention of harming him. The victim's wife assured officers that this was not the case and that Hettle had threatened to shoot her when she tried to retrieve her husband's body following the shooting. The footage was played in its entirety during Hettle's trial, leading to him being found guilty of first-degree murder in October of 2021. The following January, the man was consequently given a life sentence. Number 4. Jahade Chauncey. On January the 16th of 2021, 23-year-old Jahade Chauncey was ambushed outside a recording studio in Staten Island, New York, by 2 armed robbers. The incident was caught on a Ring doorbell camera which showed both assailants lying in wait until Chauncey stepped outside, at which point they pushed him back inside. Gunshots subsequently rang out before the perpetrators fled the scene. An ambulance was immediately called to the studio, but Chauncey died soon after being transported to the Staten Island University Hospital. The victim, a young entrepreneur, had founded the recording studio along with several friends the previous year. Darren Boyd and Ming Liu, who were 30 and 29 respectively at the time of the incident, were arrested 5 months later. They had allegedly planned the deadly robbery to recover money owed by someone associated with the studio. The latest available information on the case indicated that the 2 men had pleaded not guilty to their charges. Number 3. Clarence Stokes. On August the 27th of 2021, New Jersey man Clarence Stokes brutally murdered 44-year-old Latrick Avery and her fiancé, 67-year-old Stanley Gunter, at the couple's shared residence. After stabbing Gunter to death in the apartment, Stokes followed his second victim to a neighbor's house, as was captured by a doorbell camera. Avery frantically knocked on the door, screaming for help. As Stokes moved in on her, Upon reaching her, the assailant repeatedly stabbed her with a folding knife. By the time police arrived at the scene, Avery was lying unresponsive on the porch. She was rushed to the Hackensack University Medical Center in critical condition, but was declared dead shortly thereafter. Stokes was quickly identified as the couple's killer after detectives reviewed the recordings. Later that night, he was arrested, whereupon officers found traces of the victim's blood on his clothes. Stokes was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the incident's aftermath.
Hey, it's Carl. Be sure to subscribe and leave your comments in the comments section below, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get your video going next.
Number 2. Albuquerque Prowler. Between February and May of 2021, a New Mexico woman received several notifications from her Ring doorbell camera regarding someone prowling around her Albuquerque home. The resident, who requested to remain anonymous, called 911 on 4 different occasions and even provided them with recordings of the stranger who was captured walking around her porch and attempting to peer into her windows. Francesca Perdue, a crime prevention specialist from the Albuquerque Police Department, indicated that while they've been alerted to the situation, the suspect has left the scene before the arrival of law enforcement on each occasion. If caught, the stranger faced a potential trespassing charge, which can be treated as a misdemeanor or felony depending on the situation. No further incidents were publicly reported as of the latest updates on the matter. Number 1. Maureen Martin. Ohio woman Maureen Martin contacted the police after a stranger carrying a gun knocked on the door of her Toledo residence late one night in August of 2020. Martin informed officers that the man had been recorded by her Ring doorbell camera, which she'd turned on upon growing concerned that someone might be trying to gain access to her home. She refused to open the door as she kept a watchful eye on the man, who had a weapon tucked into his waistband as he stood outside her porch. When Martin continued to ignore his knocks, he walked away, followed by a second person who had been hiding nearby. While Martin was on the phone with 911, she reportedly heard someone prowling around her backyard, trying to open the door. The stranger was wearing a mask, making it virtually impossible to identify him through the surveillance recording. Nevertheless, local police distributed the video to the general public in the hopes that someone might recognize the suspect. Martin, who was left terrified by the incident, told reporters that each of her neighbors had indicated that they planned to purchase doorbell cameras to help bolster security in the area. Thanks for watching. If you had the superpower to forever rid the world of one of the following, which one would you choose? Scam call centers or porch pirates? Let us know in the comments section below.